Hey everyone, welcome to SDR Enablement, another edition. Actually, in fact, it's number 2 edition, but who's counting? And Jason, how is your week going? How is the sales floor? What is new and exciting in your world, my friend?
It's good. We've had a good week thus far. It's not like even just one day into it, but as you and I were just talking, with a 3-day weekend coming up, we're trying to crank out a bunch of work for clients so we don't lose any momentum going into next week. But yeah, it's good. We got a couple of new campaigns kicking off, so
And
it's been
re-up those
positive.
activity goals, right?
That's right. Yeah, always.
They thought that 100 dials was a little weak, so now they're up to 10,000. Small jump.
Yeah, we must break 10,000.
I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't believe it when they wanted us to do 250, and I'm like, actually, funny story to go and start this show. I got fired by a manager, partly because I didn't know when to shut my mouth, partly because he was incompetent, but who's keeping track? He walks over to me and he goes, "Nick, you're not making your dials." I was like, "Yeah, but my next 3 weeks are booked already. So I'm actually going back and building business cases and doing some other work and cleaning up my lists."
Right.
"Well, why aren't you doing more dials?" "Did you not hear me? I already have 3 weeks booked in advance and I'm doing research." "Well, if you don't go and do more activity, you're going to be fired." I was like, just to be clear, you would fire me because other people are effectively useless and I'm not. I was like, why does it take you 100 calls to go and book 5 meetings? I was like, yeah, maybe you need to go for more training because it sounds like you suck at what you do. And then that was my last day at that company.
I could understand why. I mean, the response, but not the work. It's hilarious. We hit the market was telling us last year. I've told you we're not a volume play. We are strategic outbound into high value targets. But last year the market was telling us everybody was volume. We need more. We need more. We need more. So we switched took a couple of campaigns on, and we were like, look, we're gonna try it. Our call volume went up about 70% in July and August, and our productivity went down 36%. So our story is
Wow.
volume is not the answer, which is what we preach against all the time. And
I wouldn't have expected those numbers. Do you want to go and say those numbers for our listeners one more time? That was pretty wild.
Our call volume went up 70%, and our execution productivity, meaning meetings booked, went down 36%. So we were just burning through market. It was all volume based, and we were making thousands of calls. And what was interesting too was the ones that we did book, show rate dropped significantly too. We typically are between 80 and 85% show up, and we dropped down to about 65%.
I think with that said, I got to go and get into our first topic of the day because I feel like you just moved us in there so easily and smoothly that I just got to take your cue. So,
all right, without even knowing, let's go.
Without even knowing, like how is that for good sales, ladies and gentlemen? I think he's on to something. So 95% of the time, the winning vendor is on the shortlist on day 1, and 94% of buyers are using large language models before talking to sales. So I'm going to throw this question in the chat because I would love to get your guys' feedback. Plus, if you guys are watching the recording, still go and throw it in there because we both still respond. If 95% of buyers already have their winning vendor shortlisted on day 1 of the buying cycle, is traditional outbound sales just an illusion of control for sales leaders?
It's a really good question. I think
Anybody
it is
in the chat, please just join in, and I'll go and read your comments, but please don't be shy. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting stat, and I don't know that I believe it. But I think there is some illusion of control. But and I think it starts well before the quote unquote shortlist. Um, if you do outbound correctly, and the short list, so to speak, should be even shorter than what you experience if you just lumped in. Uh, Again, we always try to look at the pain points. What does it mean to the person? And a great example, I was just talking to a client this morning, and they have this, they have a it's for policy holders, carriers. It's a platform that you own. A lot of insurance outsources vendors. They have to wait for backlogs to update and curate the needs of the insurance companies and the carriers, and it costs them money. And if you have to wait to churn a policy, it can cost you money, obviously. Um, but this is a self-serve, own your platform, own your data, and they just did a implementation with a pretty big carrier, and it's a very powerful case study. And they didn't share it with us. We didn't know it. I was, before the meeting, was doing some research and saw it. And I was like, why are we not using this? And the quote that they got, so they went full cold turkey, everything else, transitioned everything to this platform over a 12-month period. Everything else is stopped. And the quote that I loved was, the guy said, it's the difference between owning your home and renting your home. And I just think, that's a powerful statement, and it's proof positive for folks that are experiencing the issue. So, we get a meeting with that type of relevance. I think that this 95% shortlisted thing is, and I don't, like I said, I'm not sure I buy that anyway.
I
I
think
don't.
that most people have someone in their head that they want to work with before they start.
Yeah.
And I think it's we're in a world where it's the fear of messing up, not the fear of missing out. And what I go back to is, why do we actually focus on activity metrics? It's laziness on managers' parts. Managers are running it like it's a factory floor. We're intellectual workers. We're not factory workers.
Yep.
And it is just, it's a horrible way of doing things. And the reason I say that is, if you actually look at the definition of production, production means creating economic value for the business. There is no economic value in cold calling, at least how most people do it. So I'll challenge you. What do you think? When does it bring value?
Cold calling?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it brings value when it's done correctly. When it's not, like you said, it's not. If you're activity driven, you burn your market, you dilute your brand. I mean, right? The stats say what's 5 to 7% of your market is actively seeking change at any given time. Now, the one thing we don't know is when that transition happens. So if we could figure that out, we'd be millionaires. And you have to be in front of them, but you have to be in front of them with a message that resonates and a message that means something to them, because when that transition happens, you want to be on that quote unquote short list.
Well,
And
I
you
think
don't
that's
get
the
that.
piece, right? Is
Yeah.
like, it has to be relevant and it has to resonate. But how do we get that? How do we dial in that messaging?
Well, again, I think it's all pain point driven. It's all relevance driven. Every persona cares about something different. And when you're looking at trying to generate a meeting that is going to move, right? So pipeline integrity, progression, all of those things, you want to relate to the as much of the buying committee as you can identify. And a message to me is much different than a message to my head of sales,
Well,
right?
this is why I say most cold calling is not effective, not worthwhile, not like, it has
100%.
brings no value, is because they're just dialing.
Yeah.
And
They
so the thing with with activity is, it's a performance goal. What
Right.
comes before our performance goal is a learning goal. And everything you just said is such a beautiful way of summing up what's the point of learning, is that when you take the initial cold calling as market research, sales-led research, You're validating your messaging. You're figuring out your account mapping. You're figuring out who to talk to first and your prioritization of how to work those accounts and that segment. Because a lot of people will go and restart from ground zero every single time they call. But if you do this right, you should be able to reuse 80%. And that's why I say most cold calling and most SDR teams, you could fire all of them and it wouldn't make a difference other than they're just, that you're not getting that scale of luck.
Right.
And that's all this is. The difference is the professional, the elite sellers that I see, the big difference they have is they do research. And even though they don't know it or like explain it that way, if you watch them even doing in some account mapping, they're looking for things that are invisible. But it's through trial and error of years of failure and success that they learn what works and what doesn't. And this is what makes it so hard for them working remotely to go and teach new people, because some of that is just inherent stuff that you have to debrief, you have to go and do deal reviews, you have to do these things to go and figure out why. And it's
Yeah.
not always obvious. And I saw a stat the other day that was just fascinating, but it makes sense from what me and you have talked about a lot. Where is it? It was something like the average seller is getting like a 2 point. Oh, here it is. So cold calling has an average of 2.7% baseline success rate, but elite reps are hitting 13%. The hell are they doing it?
Listen, the good sellers that I see, right? Because we get to look and at every call that we book, and we get to look at execution, and the diagnostic nature of the first call is significantly different, right? They're trying to figure out what is the true pain of the person on the other end of the phone, right? And versus getting there and just dumping features and benefits and being the Swiss Army knife of, we can solve, what problem do you have? Because we can solve them all.
Who do you
They
sell
really,
to? Everyone.
right, yeah, and they really jump in and dig into, and if they talk 25% of the time, it's rare. They ask questions, they listen, they're building a case, and then the next step is also what you see, and I don't see that a lot, because you don't get off that first call without having a defined next step. And whether that defined next step is, hey, it's not a fit. That's still, you have a definitive next step, and I I would say somewhere between 60 and 65% of the calls that we hear, the end. First of all, they get bumped up because they don't pay attention to time. That's another thing really good reps do. They confirm time, pay attention to it. They start to wrap up 5 minutes left, because when you get to that 2 minute mark, everybody has a hard stop. And then the follow up is, just send me an email and we'll get back on the phone. Now, I don't know about you, but I've sent a bunch of emails. I'm still waiting on a reply. So I think it's a lot of it is structure and then execution, and they're very rigorous in how they go about that. But a majority of what I see is, and this is, I think, why we have the 80-20 rule that everybody talks about. To me, like, that's just like when I hear somebody say we have a 10% sell rate and we just need, right, that's our push through rate, and
We just need more at bats.
yeah, we just need more bats. Why that we shouldn't accept that. And we shouldn't accept that 80% of our revenue is produced by 20% of our reps.
It's
Like,
still crazy how many companies that do that, and then they wonder why when these hero reps leave, why they're screwed.
yeah,
Well, isn't it obvious?
yeah. And they've done nothing to take the 80% of the reps that are producing 20% of the revenue and lift them up. And it's not that, like, I mean, I'm a firm believer in, I don't think you can ever rarely get a C player to be an A player. A players just have it, and they're just A players, right? And it's like the strengths and weaknesses thing, right? It's like I'm not, if I wasn't good at math, there's no amount of studying that's just going to make me be a star math student, right? I'll study enough to pass, I'll study enough to be proficient, but if you can lift those people from a C to a B, you change your entire, portfolio of salespeople. And that's really like one of the things that we try to help with sales teams, because we do all of this. We give them the entry point when the call gets booked, and then we do a summary after the call. And you'd be amazed at how many sales leaders don't actually act on that data. And it's a very easy to course correct, especially nowadays, because you're not getting reports a week later, you're getting it almost in real time.
Hopefully.
And you know you don't it's not once a week review, and then that account or that call is set quiet or cold for a week. Like, you can immediately follow up. You can say, look, I think here's the right move for you to make after the call. But that's the thing. I think people it's structure and execution, to me, from what I see between really, really good reps and,
So I think if we take that and we go back to our first question, if 95% of buyers already have their winning vendor shortlisted on day one of the buying cycle, is traditional outbound sales just an illusion of control for sales leaders? I don't know if illusion of control is the word I would use. It's definitely a waste of time, but only because where we have influence is just happening sooner. But it's not in the way that most people look at it. If you look at how buying behavior has changed, what they want is asynchronous. They want to be able to go and do research so that they can come to the conversation smarter and ask the right questions. Because what actually happens more often than not is most salespeople focus on the basic bullshit, the obvious, which also
Yep.
makes buyers feel stupid, or that they assume that they are stupid when they're going over basic features and the obvious stuff that everybody knows. But what most people don't get into is implementation, the risk management portion of it, of basically how sure are you that this is going to work? How long is it actually going to take before I start seeing results? When will I actually see the full ROI that you promised me? And how much is it actually going to cost? Is that the true cost? Is that only part of the cost because you're hiding it in resources or change orders down the road? And so I think what happened is we actually split the middle and bookended our need for sales. So I think saying that activity is a great way of tracking sales is like saying impressions is a great way of tracking marketing. It's focusing on it's stupid. But if we change it to, like, we track marketing based on CAC, and then we track sales based on success rate, or because I don't even think win rate is a good thing to go and track anymore, because so many deals get sold and based on top line commission, and then aren't actually profitable for the company. So it's a misalignment of all of this. And so when I say we bookend, there's a lot more effort that needs to go into helping people find you. So you just to hit their radar, because there's so many options right now. And if your company's doing good work on educating the market, helping people become better buyers, which is prospecting in my mind, and tagging them into your marketing so your marketing can serve them, so you're doing one to many, that is how sales has evolved from the traditional one to one. You're doing your market research, you're validating in real time, you're getting feedback, you're adjusting your approach based on that feedback, dialing your messaging, dialing your personas, dialing in how you work accounts, and then you're sharing that with marketing so marketing can go and help with that, and then hopefully pass them back when they're ready. So the joke I've always had is most guys can buy a suit, where they need help is when it comes to tailoring. But some people will just buy and never tailor, so you don't need to worry about them. But yet most people do, and they waste time and money trying to get them to buy when they're already buying.
Yeah.
And I think this is that shift. And because a lot of calls on the buyer's end, once the call happens, it's gone.
Yeah.
So how do they go and take that back to their board? How do they take that back to a business partner? How do they go and talk about it with their team? So if it is a complex B2B product, you've done a disservice and wasted your time, because you've actually not helped them facilitate a conversation or solve a problem or pick a solution. And this is why I say, like, you could almost got to go and put it, instead of doing sequences that are, I read a thing the other day that the average sequence right now is 37 steps. Why?
Yeah.
If they didn't care on the first one, they didn't care on the second one. You know, you had
They're going to
nailed
care
it
a lot
last
less
year.
than the 37th.
Well, what you had said last week that was so true is that the only way that would be effective is if something prioritized it and the timing was right now.
Right.
Otherwise, if they look that you emailed them 37 times, they're going to think that you're selfish and you don't care about anyone but yourself, and not necessarily just the seller, but the company. Then you're going to get it's just, you're seen as a spam engine. And I think this is what we need to start looking at is, as sales leaders, is our customer acquisition costs going down as a whole, both in sales and marketing? Are our service tickets going up or down? Because if our service tickets are going up, we're selling shit we shouldn't be selling. And if our sales cycles are getting longer, but our overall sales are getting our ACVs are going down. Well, if the average contract value is going down, why? What changed? And I think these are what we need to be worrying about, not activity metrics, because if we solve for that, that is what we actually need to worry about. Activity metrics is when you have no clue what you're looking for.
Right.
Like if
It's
you're
just,
not building business cases for that account, or you're not building like a segment business case, or you're not doing some type of research, and you're not mapping out all these different things that we have to do. This is why sales gets caught doing useless activity, is because there is no outlet, and it's not appreciated, that knowledge that they're gaining while actually targeting accounts.
yeah. If they're getting knowledge, right? I
If
think
they're
the other
getting
problem,
knowledge.
right? The other problem of that is when you tie, you and I've talked about this as well. Like one of the false positives around outbound and pipeline is the fact that when you have an incentive for someone to create pipeline, they're going to create pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you the illusion that your outbound is working because your pipeline is big. Well, how many times have we, and then you go back and you look at your close rate, and if those two don't gel, right, then there's either 90% garbage in your pipeline, right, or your people are just bad at selling.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's these controversial and contradicting incentives across the board. Right? You drive activity then drives what we have to create pipeline. The pipeline generates, and then you sell, like you said, 10-15%. So it would tell our goal was to look at, like, one of the things we talk about is pipeline integrity and revenue progression, right? We want to see who are the buyers that are moving the needle forward in the deals that we are producing. And then we try really, really hard to hold our clients somewhat accountable to the execution of that, which is why we do some of the things we do on the back end. Because, the first thing you're always going to say is, well, the leads are terrible as a salesperson. That's, and I can say that because I am one, have been one, still am. But you have to look deeper. You got to look at you can't, what people are seeing is the effect, and they're mistaking it for the cause. And I think that's, it's backwards.
Do you remember the days when they first started doing email blasts?
Yeah.
And they would be like, oh, another email blast going out. And it was, if you guys haven't gone through this, it was the most insane thing that I have ever been through as a seller. Because you'd get 80, 100, 150 leads a week, and people actually wanted to talk to you. And then they're like, oh yeah, we're going to do another one. No, like don't do another one yet. I have more than enough stuff to keep me busy. Like push it off a week or two.
Right. Slow it down.
So
I remember that well.
The question I wanted to go and ask you before I go and get into the next one is, if only 2.7% are effective for cold calling, is it corporate malpractice to force junior reps to make 100 blind dials a day?
Yes. The short answer, yes. Again, you're measuring the wrong thing. You're not measuring effectiveness. And that's that back end math that we always talk about. And if we're saying it's 2.7% is effective, then I'm going to reverse engineer it. And sales is not an engineering problem, right? It's not a math problem, it's an engineering problem. And you have to be able to architect the right process. And I've always said, and everybody that knows me, I'd rather have 5 good meetings in a month than 50 that are I'm guessing where the nugget is, right? And I think you do a disservice to the reps. This is, again, like, if you don't know where your 10%, let's stick with that number, is going to come from. Right? Is it going to be in the middle of 100 meetings that I have booked? Is it going to be at the end? And you have a deteriorating prep, you have deteriorating execution. And I think that's another reason that we just get lazy and we just show up, because it's like, well, I've had 50 of these and I haven't, not one of them has, gone forward or has the desire or the indicator of being a deal. But if that's true, then you look back, well, why are 10 of them in your pipeline? So again, you go back to that, that negative incentive to create pipeline. It's like, if we were all looking at true data, and anything that you created as an opportunity, if you're at a 10% sell-through rate, even 25%, you're doing a lot of things wrong. We have really shortened our list, and we went through that phase of, like, I would say some of it was probably just we believed in our process enough to believe that we could make anything work, right? We could work with anybody. And I still think there are a handful of people that we worked with that it wasn't successful engagement. Had we exercised patience and we weren't trying to turn the heat up because they were turning the heat up on us, I think we would have been, probably a much better engagement. But we're really honed in on what is a good client for us, right? And that's helped tremendously. And we're at 60% selling everybody we talk to. So now we don't talk to we'd be a $40 million company if we talk to 500 people, but we're not, because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So our goal was 5 to 7 meetings a month for our sales team, and they're good meetings.
Yeah, worth actually having.
Yeah, and they're progressing. They actually have the need, and what we do should be a relatively quick decision, meaning that, like, the need for that is not going to go away, right? The need for quality meetings is not going to just magically disappear. So they should want to solve it quickly, because there's hidden cost involved in that outside of what it costs for us, right? It's your opportunity cost, it's your out of market cost, it's your continuing to be in market the wrong way cost, right? The brand dilution cost that you're creating by, well, we didn't hit our number last month, so we need to go up 50 phone calls this month. That's like,
And I think if you start going in that math, like the way people think about it is wrong, because it's so singular. I sat down with a team, and this is actually what changed my mind on when to cold call. And so what we did is, if you guys want to get really nerdy, it's called Gittens Index, Gittens, Gittens. And it's a data science formula, basically, that if you take a certain action, what does it add or subtract from your win rate? How likely is it to move it forward? And so I was working with this team, and they were saying that they just didn't, funny enough, you're going to love this, not enough at bats. And I'm like, okay, well, that's weird, because you guys have power dialers, you have a bunch of sequencers, like they are going gangbusters on activity. And so I started, instead of looking at impressions and looking at activity, I started looking at costs. And so I asked the team, what was their CAC? Because it was for a B2B SaaS company. It's like, what is your average CAC? What's your average customer acquisition cost? They told me $25. $25 is what they spent on ads. So I was like, Okay, now let's do the real number. How many dedicated headcount did you give to that? How many different salespeople were dedicated to that? What percentage of their time? So we went and worked it out. Guess what it ended up being?
I couldn't imagine.
They do enterprise sales, so they are bigger deals, but it was on average 8,800 and climbing.
Wow.
And when they were doing it previously, it was below 2,000, but every time they added in automation and different AI and touch points, it actually went up. And so what we realized is that because they were choosing to cold call because that's what they preferred, because that's what, 30 years ago what worked. Nobody actually questioned why. They just said the sales leader just said you need to be cold calling, so that's what they were doing. So what we did instead is we started looking at through the CRM, which was a little bit dangerous because not everybody puts real information into the CRM, but
No
we
kidding.
started looking at, okay, what deals closed faster than other deals, but also stuck on the books and were
Right.
had a solid implementation. Like they were happy, quick wins. What was different? And so we spent the better part of 2 weeks doing all this research. And guess what the biggest difference was?
The outreach, the initial contact,
Guess where it
yeah,
happened?
and a cold call.
Not a cold call.
No, was it
Second guess. Where would you say would the next place be?
Yeah, if it's a sales function, I mean, it would be, well, I mean, I guess it'd be marketing too. You could say email, but
It was an email.
all right, I give up. You
LinkedIn.
stumped me. LinkedIn.
And
All
so
right.
then I got interested again. I was like, okay, so what are they saying? What are they like? What are the different types of interactions? But then we found something that was very mind-boggling when we were doing this research and we're trying to go and sort through these touch points. Well, it kept saying that LinkedIn was working really well, but when we looked, it was below 1%. And I was like, well, why does it keep saying that these deals are coming from LinkedIn when it's showing that less than 1% of those touch points are actually working? And so then I started filtering the ones back that showed that LinkedIn was the main touch point, and it sped up them buying. And it blew my mind. It was not at all what I was expecting. I was expecting an in-mail or a DM, and it was
Right.
neither. It was a non-sales touch point. So what the elite sellers were doing, what they were bringing forward like thoughtful questions or statements to see if the client or the particular persona they were targeting saw the world the same way they did. They just wanted to confirm if they saw the symptoms or they saw the problem and what they thought it was.
That makes sense. I
And
mean,
the thing,
again, that should be your messaging across the board.
it should be, but the thing that was really interesting is they also contacted on average 8 people in the company commenting.
Really?
And so what would happen, and I asked one of the elite, so I brought the top 10% reps versus the bottom 10%, and I interviewed them to go and see how they looked at LinkedIn to get some more clarification. And I basically just said, just work and let me watch, and I'll ask you questions if I need you to clarify things. And we did some screen recordings. And it was fascinating. The top 10% of reps would speed through just doing quick touch points, sending blank connection requests. So, and I said, why are you keep sending blank? Why aren't you using like a personalized request? He's like, oh, I don't care if they connect with me. And like, I don't need them to start a conversation. What I'm trying to
Yes, you
do,
do. Yes, you do.
no, it was fascinating. So he said, what I notice as soon as I have 5 connections in common, I can go up to seniority and they'll accept my connection request. But he's like, what I
Interesting.
noticed is when they accept my connection request and I'm talking to different people in his company, they notice that I have some trust and they start following my content. And what was really fascinating is this one elite seller, and he was like a factor of 10 higher than everyone else in the company. I couldn't understand how this guy was doing it. I thought he actually had a outsourced team in India or something that was helping him and he was just keeping it on the down low. But what he was doing is
I've
he
seen
was
that.
using content as a drip So he took his sequences that were working, took it out of the sequencer and just put it on LinkedIn. So he was doing a daily content drip, and the question he would ask himself is, what would I want these people to know if I never talked to them directly? And then what he was doing is he was using the algorithms of the different platforms he was working on that would make him pop up in feed and prioritize. So every time he would comment on LinkedIn with someone, the algorithm would boost his stuff. Every time he would DM them and they'd have a conversation, it would boost his stuff. So instead of trying to go and sell them for the first 2 weeks, he would just warm them up by just keeping conversations going so that they would just talk to him and feel comfortable talking to him. But every day his content was top of mind, and by the end of 2 weeks, he was getting people from every account commenting back.
But that's patience, right? That's the part that we don't practice. Blind volume without research or signal or a compelling reason to call doesn't produce pipeline. It just produces noise. And what's amazing about that is the compounding cost of more noise is something that sales leaders rarely ever calculate.
Yes, such a good point.
And that's what we try to avoid. But it's interesting. So we've had this. Look, we've got a methodology. It's tried and true. We've adjusted it because the market has adjusted. We do a few things different, but our foundation. I think I talked to you about this. It's like I always say, it's like the golf swing, right? There's literally thousands of things you can do wrong, and there's only a handful of things that you can do right to produce an optimal shot. And we stick to those foundational pieces. But I'm saying all this to say that we get to LinkedIn, and we have this belief that LinkedIn will not work for us because we're doing outreach for other clients. And my belief is, like, who cares? Like, it's not a secret that other companies outreach for other companies. It's not a secret. There's literally hundreds of us out there. And they used to have this cute little quirk that it's like, well, we have multiple personality disorders, so we can't do LinkedIn because we work for multiple clients, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, who cares? It's a signal. It's a brand impression for us. If someone is curious enough to go in and look, like, you're lucky if they look at your profile, if they accept your connection request. I mean, I always go in and look at the profile, read what they do. And if it's a valuable connection for me, I don't blindly accept. I kind of look and see if it's valuable for them and me. And so, we started doing it, and it's made a tremendous difference in our ability to get in front of people, be relevant. And it's not sales. Like, we're not selling. Right. So I do believe that. I don't think we're as good as we can be at it yet, but
it's always a work in progress, and it's constantly evolving. Because like I don't know, when me and you started, and like, correct me if your experience was different, but the phone was the ultimate way of getting business.
Right. There's no doubt.
I would say the one thing I find really fascinating, and I don't know if your data supports this too, but the biggest thing that I can tell if I'm going to win a deal is I have 3 champions internally that I have their cell phone numbers. Not that I went and stole off the internet, that they requested me to actually have a conversation with them. Once I get more than one, my win rate goes above 90%.
I believe that.
But it doesn't make a difference when I have access to their emails, and I can take a meeting with them. It's only their phones. But the biggest difference is over the age of 45 versus under the age of 45.
That's interesting.
So over the age of 45, if I have their personal cell phone number, or like their personal, like their business cell, I have an over 90% win rate. And then where email comes in is summarization for collaboration. So we'd like to build a business case together. That was never the case previously. Before, it was cold call, send an email just to go and give the data in front of them, and then book a meeting, and the deal was done.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting. I feel like we almost went backwards.
Well, we have to some degree, I think, because there is so much noise out there,
Oh,
and
speaking
it's
of noise, if your AI SDR wrote the cold email and the buyer's AI gatekeeper read it, summarized it, and deleted it, did a sales touch point actually happen?
I think yeah, I think a sales touch happened. I think it depends on how you classify it.
I
But
agree. I'm curious, like, what do you have a line in the sand, or is there any, like, how do you look at how do you define a touch point?
so touch point for us is it, like, well, we do things a little bit different. We look at
Mm.
everything in rounds, right? So when you think about traditional outreach, and we talk about all the call volume stuff, and I tell you that's not us. We don't look at we don't look at call volume. We look at round volume. How many rounds did we do, and how many touches inside of that round? So when we call a company, our first intro into that company can last 13 to 15 minutes. Whereas historically, traditionally, you would look at it's what 120 to 140 seconds, depending upon how many times it rings, how long the voicemail is, and how long it's the voicemail that you left is, and how many times you delete it and re-record it. Because we're looking at touching a person, and we we work really really hard to get access to an individual, whether it's an admin or whether it's a key player. Like, we don't care. Admins are extremely valuable, and most people don't look at them as such. They look at them as
Yeah.
roadblocks, right? But no, I would argue that nobody in that organization, aside from the CEO, probably knows better than the admin who handles what. That
And
period.
even then, I would
I would
challenge that
challenge
to
this
say, yeah, because I've worked with a lot of
100%.
admins, and I'm like,
Yeah.
if you ever got sick or like something ever happened to you, this business would just fall apart.
Yeah. Um, it's so that's how we look. That's how we look at touches. So when you think about if a AI SDR, I might say it's not real. It might be a database entry versus a sales touch point. Um, but you have to follow up on that point, that entry. I mean, it's not a touch point that you just leave if you do consider it a touch point. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we don't. I mean, we don't use AI in that sense. Uh, so it's a little off for me, but I would think most people, the answer, if you asked a majority of folks, it would be, yeah, that's a
Well,
sales touch point.
they're also tracking activity, so it is just a
Right.
checkbox. My
Exactly.
my interpretation of a touch point is a meaningful conversation. I need to learn something. And it could be as simple like getting a very big negative and them clarifying that this isn't important,
Yeah.
or my messaging is wrong. And that to me is still a win,
Yeah.
right? Because I came in there with an assumption and I figured out my assumption was wrong. Instead of continuing with that assumption and making an ass out of you and me, I just went, you learn, and you move on. And
Right.
that's the beauty of sales.
Yeah. That's one of the things I think I mean, we take real care with the message, and we adjust relatively quickly, because we know that if the message is resonating and we're saying the right thing, we're going to be eventually led to the CEO of the business problem that our clients are trying to solve. If we don't get that traction internally and we don't see progression, and like, there are times, like, by round 5, the admin in that company, or admins, they know our callers.
Hmm.
I mean, I've heard them be like, "Hey, Drew, how are you? I'm fine. Look, I mean, they've built a relationship because they're respectful, they're relevant, and that they're trying to be helpful. And if we don't have that kind of interaction relatively quickly, then we know that the message isn't resonating. And it's a real friction between us and some of our clients, because they want to do the F&B dump. Like, here's why we're so great. And nobody cares about why you're great. They care about what they're experiencing. And
I also
how can
find it
you help?
ironic. They say that this is why we're great. And I was like, do you really think that's unique to you? Because I looked at every one of your competitors and it's literally the
Right.
first thing they write on the start of their website.
Yeah,
No, they don't. Definitely do.
definitely. And that's what we try to, warn against is you don't want to, like, you can't sound the same. Everybody has AI. Everybody has,
Oh, maybe
risk
next,
management.
maybe not next week or like, but sometime in the next month, maybe we'll have to go and bring on your team, or even me and you can just do this. Or if we have a willing participant that wants to join us. Have I ever told you about the prospecting dilemma that I run with teams to teach them account mapping?
No, I don't think we've talked about that.
Oh, this is a heck of an exercise. And it was a game for me. It started as a way because I was getting bored because just the amount of stakeholders and companies was getting so big. I was getting analysis by paralysis or paralysis by analysis. And I tried to make it a game. And I didn't realize that it was going to be such a helpful tool. So I call it the prospecting dilemma. I modeled it after the prisoner's dilemma, so like game theory. So the name of the game is once you pitch, you're dead. So you can only pitch once. As soon as you've pitched, the deal is done. Either they say yes and you move on, or you say no and it's dead and you can't contact them for the next 2 years.
Yep.
So you're only allowed to talk to 10. So here's the rules. You're only allowed to talk to 10 people max at an account. You're never allowed to message again unless they respond. No follow-up.
Interesting.
So you're only allowed to 10 people, 10 personas in that. So
10%.
just 10
10%.
people in total, one
Yep.
account, 10 people. As soon as you pitch, you're dead. How do you tackle it?
Well, I would say it would be, I mean, other than the touches, it's easy for us because we don't pitch. So our goal is, like I've always said, I think one of the reasons we're more successful than internal teams, because that's human instinct, is to tell them and, just dump on them and get them, to agree to a meeting. Our product is not our client's product. Our product is the message and the meeting. So we stick, Harvard Business Review did a study a while back on, what separate, good cold calling, good sales from great sales, great cold calling. And it was two main characteristics: situational dominance and verbal acuity. And it's not
Mm,
dominance in the sense that you push through and you're a bully.
yeah, the
It's dominance,
challenger.
right? It's dominance that you just never lose control of the call. You always know what to say next. And then verbal acuity is right. It's speaks for itself. Like, you're very crystal clear on what you want to accomplish, and it's not this data dump, the show up and throw up type. You're very succinct and clear on what you want to do. And then you go back and look at some of the reasons we do our messaging the way we do. It's to reduce cognitive load. Nobody asked to receive an email or a phone call from you. So you have to get to the point relatively quickly. And that point should be about them and not
Mhm.
about you. And so our messaging is built around that human psychology component, and it allows us to stay verbally acute. We're very succinct. We don't drone on. Um, the the tough part would be not being able to reach back out, but unless they respond, um, that would be interesting. I don't know how you'd push through that other than just go, you hone in on your message, you hone in on what works, you hone in on what you're saying, and make sure that delivery is, acute. One of the things I think that outreach does incorrectly is, and you and I have talked about this, that inherent need to try and change what you're saying, so that, human nature tell me, if I called you and you didn't call me back, that I didn't say something that was interesting to you. So I'm going to say something different. And then I'm going to call somebody else and say something different. And if those two people talk, they really couldn't connect the dots. So when you keep the message right, succinct and concise, and very value driven, and it's the same message to everybody aside from maybe the pain point that they feel, right? They're able to digest that and regurgitate it in their own language, and then everybody starts talking about it. I would say that would be the one thing that ripple effect of the message to get a response from somebody. Because if you talk to 10 people and all 10 people know that this is an issue, they're going to end up talking about it, and they're not going to talk about the guy who called or the girl who called and left 5 different messages. They're going to talk about the thing that we have in common, because they all received the same thing. There's no whisper down the lane or anything like that. That would be interesting, though.
Maybe we'll do another episode, and we'll pick a company and we'll walk through it. But
yeah,
it made me rethink how I pick and prioritize sales channels. And so everybody says you need to go to the VP. Well, how I started looking, and we can do an episode on this specifically because there's a lot to it, but I started treating sales like a murder mystery. And I realized that if I go to the judge and jury asking them to do the work for me, I failed. No.
He agrees.
Murder mystery. And so what I would do is I would actually look at building that business case first. And so depending on how strong the business case is, taxi, enough. Depending on how strong the business case is, will depend on where I start. Because I don't want to go to the judge and jury and get kicked out of court because there's no case.
Right.
And so I don't go to a VP unless I have enough, like I've learned enough through other accounts and know that I can, that they have shared problems, they have shared experiences, that it's going to be priority 1 or 2 or nothing else. And so that's what I started doing. So to me, I only go as high as what I can confirm. And I don't want to go any lower. But if I don't know, and like if I'm a brand new seller, or I'm selling a brand new product into a brand new segment or a brand new geography, then I go and start lower. And my goal is to figure out who lives in the pain, figure out what they tell themselves about that. What's the story they tell themselves? What are the different symptoms that pop up, and why does it matter in their day-to-day life? And then I look at who comes before it that it affects, and who it comes after, who does it affect. But I'm cold calling or emailing or using social media for research purposes to build that business case, because that's where all my messaging, that's where all my account mapping and prioritization and even timing and triggers come in, is based on those conversations. And so I prefer indirect to start, and then I go direct, because I found that the person I want to talk to might not be on social media, or they're just not as open to conversations. But when I go and start somewhere else first and then switch, I would have more data. I'd have more validation and conversations that I could rely on and use, almost like the days when we used to work in the bullpen, hear what was working on around us, use that and move on. But I just started creating that within companies instead of doing that within my own company.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I think it is the murder mystery approach. You've got to, I like the analogy of going to the judge and the jury and asking them to do the work for you. You have to build your case, right?
Case for change.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to, I believe, structure and philosophy in the whole thing. It is, if you're not learning and you're just showing up, right? That happens. I mean, again, arguably the hardest part of the sales cycle, in my personal opinion, is to start it. That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, and starting it right. If you can start a deal right, I think it has way more saving grace than you ever can being a good closer. Because if you can start with momentum, you can make mistakes and survive. Where being a closer, like, that's when service tickets go up.
Right, because you got to close something, right? But I agree with you. I think if it starts in the front end, right, with momentum and relevancy, and it's executed well, then sales cycles decrease, CAC decreases, longevity increases, and to your point, tickets, service tickets go down. So those are all positives,
Mm-hmm.
right? And but it really is, it's changing a religion. It's changing a belief that is so
Ingrained into who they
ingrained,
are.
yeah, and sales culture that it's and you imagine the effect if everybody did it and did it well.
Well, and even the people that say, well, it's because salespeople are selfish, that is bullshit because if salespeople were genuinely selfish, they would make this change because it's more effective. Like any
Right,
great elite salesperson I've ever worked with, if they see something that works better, they change. Nobody needs to tell them to change
right,
because they're smart. They're like, well, and honestly, like it's how I started looking at the sales channels after doing that win-loss analysis and working with those teams. And I was like, oh, it's so interesting. These sellers are realizing that if they pick channels they can scale, that doesn't like they have leverage and it's not just taking up all their time and they're not spending, 6 to 8 hours just on the phone talking to no one.
yeah,
That
about
that's what the
nothing.
that was the shift that they made. They're like, "Well," and there was a gentleman by the name of Phil, and it was amazing. He he was talking to 7 people a week, and then he switched to using, I can't remember if it was Slack or Reddit for his market, and he started getting anywhere from 100 to 400 conversations a week.
It's fascinating.
And he's like, the thing that's really interesting, he says, by the time I talk to them directly, it's already an opportunity.
Right.
So he's like, I can live in these chats and stir up business by just having conversation, telling people why something not's going to work, or like using my experience and knowledge to go and guide them, but not selling. I'm just trying to show them like, are you sure that's going to work? Are you sure that you've looked at the whole problem? This is a common thing that most people miss. So he was just talking about the integrity of the deal.
Yeah.
And then by the time they called him, they just needed tailoring. It was just fascinating. And he said the same thing. He's like, yeah, why I can't scale those other things because it's just my time. Where if I do those other things first, I can leverage that and it also works while I'm sleeping.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because it's going to continue to show up as relevant. But that's fascinating. There's, the LinkedIn piece that we are trying to uh, tighten up is the early data says that it's a really good thing, and I think we've missed the opportunity in the past to be at a place where we are right now better than we are right now. Like we haven't had the time, which is fascinating to me. And again, operationally, I'm never one of those people that says I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and not everything I say is right. We should have debates about things, and I'm glad that because I said it, we didn't just go, hey, let's do it. But it was an operational roadblock for us to figure out the best way to do it and why it was relevant and there's nothing bad that can happen to it. And I look back and we did a campaign for one of our clients on Reddit. That was all we did. And just got into conversations and we're directing them. We were, using their data and posted relevant responses to, relevant categories and relevant communities and conversations. And I wouldn't say it went great, but it was interesting to me how perceptive it was. Now, again, we didn't run it for a period of time that was significant to where we saw the comeback from it. But and the guy he's a great guy. He's worked with us a couple of times, and he said that it was, we were getting responses 2-3 months after you guys ran all that stuff, right?
That's the hard part. And I just noticed that we're at time, but I think that's the
Yeah.
other hard part about all of this is that your timeline also can impact like where you start and what you do. Because there's certain things I'll do when I have like a 6-month window versus when I have a 1-month window.
Right.
And I might do stuff that I know that aren't going to pay off today, but it's going to make my life easier in that like 3 to 6 month mark, depending on my audience.
Right.
But I think that's what I learned from watching the elite sellers, and also knowing what matches you well, which I think is a show and all in itself of how to take the generic scripts, email templates, formulas, and how to actually make it adapted to your voice and your superpowers, which that was an incredibly eye-opening experience for me. I definitely was not the smartest person in the room in that conversation. It was it was eye-opening. But what are your parting words for our viewers today?
Well, just thanks for joining. We're going to continue to do this. I think it's something that Nicholas and I both are extremely passionate about, and we appreciate everybody joining. And please chime in, ask questions. Hopefully, by now you see that we are an open book, pretty damn transparent, and I think we'll answer it the best way we know how. If we don't have an answer, we'll tell you we don't have an answer, and we don't have the answer to everything. I think most of this is, I don't want to say philosophical, because we both have proof points that the things that we're talking about work. And when you change your mindset and you change your architecture and execution, the world becomes a lot easier.
Amen. And just know that like the reason you'll hear it as we talk, me and Jason do not agree on everything. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. We just have different experiences and different way of tackling things. So please ask us questions. And as everybody knows, it is 2026. It is no longer acceptable to suffer in silence. If you need help, that's why we started this. We know that sales is a lonely road and it's a hard-won battle at times. Get in the comments, get in the DMs, ask for help. It's a sign of strength, and we are here to help. Thank you so much for showing up. And Jason, thank you so much for putting up with my teasing and all my questions. And everyone, I look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place.
See you guys.
Bye.